Isn't it time you got to know your technology leaders on a very real level? Welcome to our monthly podcast series. You're listening to Off the Record with GTRA, and I'm your host, Kelly Yoka. So grab your coffee or cocktail and join us for a casual yet intimate and thought-provoking expose on our top council members, ambassadors, technology innovators, and thought leaders. Thank you for tuning in to GTRA Off the Record. I am here with two very interesting guests. I have Mark Steffler, the VP of Government Practice, and Don Campbell, Director of Product Management from Quantum Secure, who will be talking about something very important with FICAM and controlling access to both logical and physical government resources, which is really becoming increasingly vital. So welcome, Mark and Don.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Before we get down to business, you and I were chatting a bit before, and I think our listeners really want to know more about your unique story and how you got involved in this industry.
Right. Well, so when I first came to Quantum Secure about 4 years ago, it's a fairly new idea, and it's changing the paradigm in the physical access world. That's very, shall I just say, the logical world is very accustomed to how things are done there, but the physical access world is still largely kind of a legacy manual world. And Quantum Secure is trying to make a change in this. And so when they're looking at how you can get people, salespeople and technology people who are coming to a new industry, what kind of skill sets do they need? They're looking to, of course, the logical and the security industry. So I spent probably the late 90s until around 2005 really in the IT security world. I spent time at AT&T and other companies like that, and the legacy physical security systems at that time were really a stepchild to the IT. And in fact, I actually remember that when about this time was when telephony really moved from a completely stovepipe separate segmented system to the network as well. Cisco really pioneered that, and others came along, and it just became a digital service. And the telephone departments that had these dedicated analog switches really went bye-bye, and we had really the IT group taking this over. And so what we're seeing in the physical security world is all these new physical security systems for cameras and IT and access control systems and all kinds of burglar break-in systems and so forth. Everything that's legacy and analog systems has also all moved digitally. So now all these are going to the network, and you need to understand how these network products, the security of them, work on an IT network. And so you have now the stakeholders from the physical security world and the IT world. And so I came through to Quantum Secure from really an IT security background, even though we're really more focused on the physical access and physical security world. So we're bringing this legacy world along into the future, into the IT world, and that's where my background really hails from.
Well, that's really why I wanted to bring, Quantum Secure into, the GTRA family, because identity management is really a big part of the CIO and CISO's cybersecurity portfolio. And historically, due to their purpose in the organization, both logical and physical access control functions have been separate domains managed by different personnel implementing, related but uncoordinated policies. So verifying someone's identity both within a government organization and among different agencies is vital. But, although the skill sets and technologies for logical and physical access are still specialized, the requirements for uniform security policy enforcement and the adoption of new access control technologies are really driving, a big and dramatic change, both to integrate the functions and the system. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, FICAM and how it applies to logical and physical access.
Right, absolutely, and this federal identity, credential, and access management roadmap and guidance. It's been there's an A and a B or second revision of it that was codified. This was sponsored by the CIO Council, which has DoD and federal governments across government initiative to try to create the policies and procedures and guidance and so forth to do all this. So this particular FICAM, we call it FICAM, the Federal Identity Credential Access Roadmap, it's about 420 pages. It's actually for a government document as a layperson and not being a government worker or a government author. I found it actually a pretty good read. It's very comprehensive. It covers from governance through implementation, through policy, and all kinds of very helpful hints and recommendations. So the whole idea behind FICAM is that the government needs to essentially regularize and normalize the entire, as you mentioned, the policies and procedures around logical access and physical access. And all this really got started 10 years ago when the HSPD 12 directive came out by President Bush. And this, of course, created then the PIV card, which is a very high assurance, what they call a level 4 card in the government, a high assurance card, electronic smart card. It can be electronically validated at time of use. And so what happens here is this token really assures the identity of the person using it and makes sure that you know that person is logging in. So at the heart of everything that we do in this world really is identity management. Who is this person? And then the question is, what access does the person have? Why do they have it? For how long do they have it? Who approved it? And is it in compliance with their policy and so forth? So manage the life cycle. And that's most of the FICAM. Part of it has to do with how do you issue the card, how do you issue the smart card, the PIV card in a correct way. The rest of it, actually 2/3 of it, is really about how do you use it for logical and physical access. So that's what FICAM covers. And FICAM at first was just a recommendation. And then in about 2011, OMB, the Office of Management Budget, the President's Office, issued a memorandum, one of the many memorandums in 1111, which mandated that all agencies align with FICAM for logical and physical access. And so the outcome here should be huge cost savings. They should be higher security, better customer service, and so forth. And so some very laudable goals in FICAM. And the OMB has got involved and said, you really need to do this. So that's really kind of the fundamental layer that we are trying to address is how can the government implement FICAM, align with FICAM, and gain all these advantages that FICAM offers them. So that's kind of where we are at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the convergence of both the logical and physical access required by HSPD 12, while that's valuable for the government in many ways, obviously creates a new set of challenges. In particular, combining on a single credential, requiring agencies to address these issues, that were handled by separate functional groups in the past. So how is Quantum Secure handling this?
Well, yeah, I mean, and before I get into the Quantum Secure piece, the card is an interesting piece of technology. It has both a contact read, which is largely, when you insert the card into like a keyboard or some kind of a reader, and it's used to control your logical access, right? You log in your computer using the PIV card, and it controls your logical access. But it's also another technology in PIV card, which is a high-frequency antenna, which transmits, they call it contactless, right, which is used for physical access because physical access doesn't use contact readers where you shove a card in because these readers would have popcorn and bubble gum and break endlessly. So they use a wireless. And so everyone's very familiar, most of us, with a MagDrive card or a proximity card that was used. Today, the government is mandating that you must use a PIV card for physical access. And so the interesting technology changes that had to occur in order to validate that PIV card at time of use, whether it's inserted as an insertion or contactless, caused the FIPS, this is the NIST organization, Federal Information Publications, these standards which govern how the PIV card operates and what it does and what's going to payload on it and so forth. They had to update the FIPS to 201-2 to assure that the card had all the features and function required to be authenticated at the time of use at a door to a contactless interface, because I think initially that was not as well thought out, perhaps, as the contact read. So now you do have a card, a single token, this card, that can be used for both logical and physical access. And it really, so organizationally, that, in my mind, is the bigger challenge facing the government, is that you have these legacy departments that have been physical security, that have done things their way. They have their own policy people, and they have their own security requirements, their own security concerns. And then you have the logical side, the CISOs, who are looking at this thing from a logical standpoint and from network security and logical identity management. And so what's needed here is truly convergence of these two very important access paradigms to converge and become really one. Now, I don't believe there's a single software platform or single system that can do everything today. I think that, as usual, the government client has to pick and choose either existing things, existing software platforms, maybe augment them with new things, possibly like a product from us to do this convergence, or something else. But it is important to align the processes, the policies, and so forth around the use of these cards, whether it's for physical or logical. So it is a big issue, and it's been going on for a while, and it's going to continue to go on for a while.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is, and many of our constituents in the on the IT side of the business, and probably haven't thought that much about the impact of including physical access controls and modernized processes in managing the life cycle of physical access. But it sounds like there's a lot of parallels. So, can you share some of your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I will say this: I do believe strongly that I made the example earlier about the telephone, the analog systems going away and really becoming part of IT. I feel strongly that IT security, first of all, identity management is an IT cybersecurity function. That's just, I don't think most people would argue with that much. So it seems like to me that since identity management is part of the CISO's portfolio of concerns and responsibility, that having these paradigms that control who gets access to what, I don't care if it's physiological, these policies and these procedures really, in my opinion, right, it's my opinion, need to be really managed and by the IT department. Now, the fine-grained policy around who can get into what door at what time for what reason, yes, those are customers of the IT department's infrastructure that they set up. But these are enterprise tools that need to be used by rank and file government employees and contractors to get their job done and streamline this. Right now, these existing systems are old, they're legacy, they're error-prone, they're costly, they're paper-based. And what we need to do is streamline this in the physical access world. And I do believe that this responsibility for at least installing the software and administering the enterprise software platform really belongs in IT, while the security department, the physical security department, is a customer of this and should be able to program in, if you want to call it that, the policies, the procedures that follow, that give them the security that they need in their enterprise for physical access. So I hope that makes sense what I'm saying.
It does. I mean, you make a compelling case, that's for sure. I mean, as I listen to this, it dawns on me that a more holistic approach is needed, generally to combine controls and manage risk in both the logical and physical domain. And, government cybersecurity folks we interact with are increasingly concerned with insider threat detection and remediation. So what can you tell us about how Quantum Secure is addressing this need?
Yeah, and we, it's interesting you say that because we have just recently been pushed by existing customers, and I will say largely in the commercial space, and Don can speak to this more in a minute when I introduce him, but they've been pushing us to give them this kind of information. What can you help us understand about the behavior of people accessing a building, a facility at odd times or what have you, and help us find that needle in the haystack. That's what the government's after you. There's millions of government employees and contractors, and out of that, 99.999% of these people are all great. They're doing a good job. They're following the rules. They want to do the right thing. But there is obviously this threat that the Snowdens of the world, if you want to call it that, where they are out to do harm. They're out to violate the rules. And so you're looking for this needle in the haystack, and you have that much data, that much big data about access to people. Only computers and only analytic tools can rise up out of that big data, the people you're looking for to have a, let's call it a high score or a high threat profile that you want to then investigate more thoroughly and make a determination of whether or not they truly are a threat to your organization or not. So our customers have pushed us, and the reason they pushed us is in our product world, we have connections to all of these disparate, distributed, stovepipe physical access controls, these legacy systems, and we know everything about every card usage, every person's attempt to swipe into a door or to badge into a door, whether it's successful or not. So we have access to all this incredible information on the behavior of people day in, day out, and therefore we can look at trending information. And so I wanted to ask, I wanted to ask Don Campbell, who's our product manager. We're rolling out our product offering. I don't want to make this a sales pitch, just rolling out a product offering around this, but we're truly a student of this as well, and we're rabid for looking for customer input on what is it they're looking for and how can we help them. So with that, maybe I could turn it over to Don to give you, unless you have another question, to kind of give you a profile about how we view this, what we're looking for, what some of the use cases are.
Well, I wanted to welcome you, Don, and again, Director of Product Management for Quantum Secure. And you have some exciting news to share about your recent acquisition by HID Global. So that must be very exciting for you guys.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's opened up quite a few new options for us as we continue to grow. It's great to have HID's resources behind all the work that we're doing.
That's fantastic. And, it'd be great to have you help our GTRA community understand your approach to insider threat detection and remediation.
Absolutely. And, I think that Mark touched on it. We bring something unique to this solution in that we understand the physical world. By tracking access for people, tracking their badges, where they are, we know who's come into the space. We know what time they normally arrive, where they go. We're creating essentially an access fingerprint for each person, and can then start to detect variations on that will indicate things from just unusual behavior, but all the way up to being able to detect if it's likely that a card has been stolen or is being used by a new person, not the person it was originally issued to, in those cases as well.
Hey, Don, thanks for that overview. I always find it fascinating to run through maybe a use case to make it real. I'm a very concrete person. I'm wondering, can you give us like a use case of how, looking at one person, what might cause the person to be looked at, what might elevate their risk to the organization in such a way that, and what automation, what tools do you have, or we should one have rather, to kind of address those, what you find, the needle in the haystack.
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple of stories that I can tell you. One of them from a beta customer we worked with, and in their case, very straightforward. Really, the pattern we were looking at was, time and place and looking for unusual access. So in this case, it was looking at people. They'd had a problem with a couple of thefts. They had some equipment that had been stolen from some of their spaces. And so they started by looking at a pattern of people who were accessing spaces late at night. The thefts had all been reported first thing in the morning, so their assumption was late at night. And then they also wanted to look and say, are there people who are going in places they don't normally go? So by looking at that fingerprint of, what are the normal places that I'm accessing, they're able to very quickly pull out patterns for people who are unusual places, unusual times. And this got rid of shift workers, anybody else who was on their normal pattern. That almost immediately pulled out a very small group of people for them to look at. One of them had been in all of the spaces at unusual times where they'd had their 3 incidents where equipment had gone missing. And so they were able to set up a little alarm based on this pattern. Next time it occurred, security did a walk around, actually found them in the process of dismantling some of the equipment, and caught the guy.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, taking that a little bit further, it's really taking data about people and their behaviors from a number of areas. So the things we look at would be who has high levels of access. If they are able to access a lot of places, then that means if that person does become an insider threat, they're more likely to succeed. So that's one of the axes that we look at. And if we do see somebody whose access has become high or is much higher than the norm or has changed lately, we can either notify somebody or automatically trigger an access review for somebody to look back and say, is all of this access that's been accumulated for this person necessary for them to do their job, or is that, some of that access unnecessary? Behavioral patterns, we look at indicators of compromise. So we'll take, human-built patterns that have a tendency to indicate somebody who's abusing or trying to work around the system. Access denied at doors, people who see that on a regular basis, or see that at high risk stores, high security areas, data centers, communication, wiring closets, that kind of thing. Pulling out these different types of behavioral patterns, and we look at these for that accumulation of understanding about a person, and take action across the board from simply saying, we saw you tried to access this space. We can send you an email and ask, was this you? Do you need access? Click here to request access to this space. Somebody needs that. We're helping them do their job.
So the idea there is just to automate. Is just to automate that process then, so there's not, there's no human involved. You can remediate that through an automation approach.
Yeah. So once you've captured those key indicators, you can set thresholds and then begin to automate that type of thing. It does need to come down to the point of being actionable. It's being able to make decisions. Use this information to drive the next steps, whether or not that's to gather additional information or to reduce or remove access that somebody has.
So that's awesome. So, Kelly, I would just like to say this. We are eager to hear from the GTRA clientele, your constituency, about what their requirements and needs are. We're a sponge here. We see the importance of this. We have the technology to deal with it, and we're interested to know, what do your clientele want? What do they consider concerns? So any input that we can gain through your collaborations with your user base and so forth at GTRA would be extremely valuable to us. And anyone who wants to contact us and give us their concerns or use cases would be extremely valuable to us. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it kind of goes back to, I think it was the founder of Black Hat, Jeff Moss. The critical infrastructure is in play. And he said, if your assets are in play, you better be able to respond. And, what's really important is that, when a network is compromised, it allows access not only to business critical data, but, all of these security sensors, access controls, video camera, et cetera. So, what are your thoughts on the outside in approach? Because it doesn't allow users to collaborate outside their specific location. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I had one thought earlier. What you're saying there is that you think about it this way, right? You want to protect your cyber assets. What is more valuable than that which is in a data center? Because if you walk into a data center, you have anything you can do. You can plug in USB drives, you can affect, you can steal, you can do whatever. So what does it take to get into a data center? Your access card lets you in, or you tailgate into that data center. Now you're physically there. What you can never do from the outside in, coming in through an outside network and trying to compromise firewalls and endless security layers of IT security, you can just compromise right away just by walking into this. So that is what I jump to, is when I think about how easy is it to actually compromise, very secure cyber protected assets. Physically, just walk up to them, stick a USB port, a USB card, thumb drive in there, and infect it, and you're off and running. So to me, that's what I think about when I think about the importance of insider threat, covering both bases, cyber and physical.
Yeah. Well, this is quite the conundrum that government, I think, doesn't necessarily know how to who's the decision maker on this. And you and I both found this at the last GTRA Council meeting in December, in your boardroom briefings. And, I think that one of the things that is going to be critical, GTRA is going to roll out a survey, just a very quick 10-question survey to the GTRA Council, CIO, and security officer community, because we really need to identify and have people start to think conscientiously about how we can, bridge the gap between the decision makers and bring them together to ultimately come up with the right solution. And I think that's where, you have two parties across the aisle from each other. Both a CIO might look at this as something that's a physical building security problem instead of their problem, and it's not.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Having the input of the end users who have the problems and the monkey on the back, what can we do to help, and how can we solve these problems? We need to hear from them and know how best to serve them. So I'm eager to understand the outcome of these surveys.
Exactly, and again, it's not about a product endorsement here, but you're one of the companies that is really pushing and passionate about trying to truly help the government and solve this problem. And that's where GTRA can, help bring the two together. So all of our guests today, I hope you can stay tuned and look for the GTRA survey as well as the results, which will be published. So check for that, and it will also be online at gtra.org as well as Quantum Secure. And, I really appreciate it, gentlemen. It's been truly a pleasure, very enlightening, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Kelly.
Tune in for our next monthly Third Thursday podcast series, Off the Record with GTRA. Make sure you save the date for our GTRA Health Tech Council Summit, June 28th through 30th in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, as well as our 5th Annual Converge Tech Awards, a recognition for technology leaders and innovators from government, healthcare, finance, and energy. Remember to nominate your peers and attend the Black Tie Awards Gala, where we announce the winners in a very exciting and dramatic envelope opening Oscar style. Also, be sure to save the date for our fall Secure Gov and Secure Health Council Summit, November 15th through 17th at the Homestead Resort in Virginia. Again, I'm your host, Kelly Yoko, and I look forward to your topic ideas, feedback, and suggested podcast participants. So feel free to reach out to me directly at kelley@gtra.org.